morning, Imagine. Cheers. Because if we were in person, I would have loved to have a cup of coffee with you. But because of everything that's going on, we got to be 6 feet virtually distant apart and all. So that was my morning toast to you. I hope you're having a good morning. If you're logging on for the first time, welcome. It's a privilege to be able to share this Sunday with you. And if you're logging on again, it's good to be able to see familiar names in the chat box. We want to invite you to share with us who's here this morning and to share what's coming up for you as you hear what's being spoken during this Sunday morning together. A couple things that I wanted to mention before we move forward in our time of worship. And the first thing is that we are not going to be meeting virtually next week. That's right. So if you just logged on right now, I'm going to say that again. We're not going to be meeting virtually next week. Instead, we are going to be doing a drive-in experience. That's right. Not a drive-through, but a drive-in experience. We're going to be driving into the Sandbox, the parking lot, where we have been meeting for our drive-throughs. And we're going to be parking our car in certain designated spots that you will see when you arrive there. You will be in your car, please know that we have in mind and are taking all the safety precautions that go into making next week Sunday possible. So you will be safe. You don't have to worry about that. You will be in your vehicle. But instead of driving through the different stations, you're going to be parking stationary. And you are going to be experiencing just such a special, memorable time together as a community. So not only are we getting ready to, say goodbye to 2020, but we're going to be able to be driving in together and experiencing and celebrating the birth of Jesus together. And so we want to invite you, and we want you to invite others to come to the Sandbox next week Sunday for a drive-in experience. It's not going to be in the morning either. It's going to be done at night. And so stay tuned for the finalizations of times that go with the logistics of parking and making that moment possible. So we will inform you of more details in the next couple of days. So stay tuned to your Instagram for updates on that as far as the exact time of when we will be doing that next week Sunday. Again, not meeting virtual next week, meeting at the Sandbox Sunday night for a drive-in experience. Secondly, it is gearing up, to say goodbye to 2020. And as we close out this year, we also want to invite you to our end of the year giving. Our end of the year giving is no different, like I mentioned last week, as our normal giving that we've been doing since we've entered into this pandemic, since we don't meet in person. But that's by going online and giving online via our website at www.imaginehi.org. Again, you can give online on our website, www.imaginehi.org, for your end of the year giving, which all of your giving is all, sorry, I thought I heard the kiddos, is all tax deductible. And so we will provide you with the information that you will need, but know that our end of the year giving is done through online on our website. For those of you who have given before, would you know that your generosity makes the moments like we're going to experience next week Sunday possible. And so we want to invite you into a space of giving. If you consider Imagine your home and have been journeying with us, would you know that your giving is also another expression of worship, a way of giving thanks. Lord, thank you for everything that you have provided me with, and also is a form of prayer, a form of your lament and crying out of, Lord, I desire to experience you as my provider. Please meet me with where I'm at. I'm choosing to trust you, with what I have. And so we want to invite you, church, into that space of giving online on our website, again at www.imaginehi.org. So enough with the logistics. Let's move forward. I'm looking at the time. What else do I have to say? What I have to say is, hey, just know you all are doing it. What is the it? The showing up is the it, which is the biggest thing. Would you know that your presence, even online, is a huge gift for other people to see that you are there, to remind them that they're not alone. I believe that God shows up at the fullest when we are in relationship with people, that we are able to experience a depth of intimacy, a depth of goodness, of grace, of love when we are connected with other people. And though we cannot be connected in person, to know that we're still connected afar virtually, it brings a deep sense of solidarity and a deep sense of joy. And so would you know, Imagine Church, that you are doing it, that you showing up is a reflection of your courage, and that your presence is such a gift. So would you be well this morning, and would you experience a deep sense of peace as we move forward together today?
Being in a good mood is really great, and most languages have lots of words to describe the experience, like happy, cheerful, joyful, and so on. The same goes for the languages of the Bible. In ancient biblical Hebrew, there's a variety of words, like simcha, sason, or gil. In the Greek New Testament, there's kara, euphrosune, or agaliasis. Each word has its own unique nuance, but they all basically refer to the feeling of joy and happiness. Now, what makes these biblical joy words interesting is noticing the kinds of things that bring happiness, and also seeing how joy is a key theme that runs through the whole story of the Bible. Let's start with sources of joy. On page 1 of the Bible, God says that this world is very good. And so naturally, people find joy in beautiful and good things of life, like growing flocks or an abundant harvest on the hills. The poet of Psalm 104 says, "A good bottle of wine is God's gift to bring joy to people's hearts." People find joy at a wedding or in their children. There's even a Hebrew proverb that compares the joy that perfume brings to your nose with the joy a good friend brings to your heart. However, human history isn't just a joy fest. The biblical story shows how we live in a world that's been corrupted by our own selfishness. It's marked by death and loss. And this is where biblical faith offers a unique perspective on joy. It's an attitude God's people adopt, not because of happy circumstances, but because of their hope in God's love and promise. So when the Israelites were suffering from slavery in Egypt, God raised up Moses to lead them into freedom. And the first thing the Israelites did was sing for joy. Even though they were in the middle of a desert, they were vulnerable, the promised land was still far away, they rejoiced anyway. Later biblical poets looked back on this story and they remembered how the Lord caused his people to leave with joy, his chosen ones with shouts of joy. This joy in the wilderness, this was a defining moment, a way of saying that the joy of God's people is not determined by their struggles, but by their future destiny. This theme appears later in Israel's story, when Israel suffered under the oppression of foreign empires. The prophet Isaiah looked for a day when God would raise up a new deliverer like Moses. That's when those redeemed by the Lord will return to Zion with glad shouts, with eternal joy crowning their heads. Happiness and joy will overtake them. And while the Israelites waited, they chose joy to anticipate their future redemption. This is why it's significant that when Jesus of Nazareth was born, it was announced as good news that brings great joy. We're told that Jesus himself rejoiced and gave thanks to God his Father when he began to announce the kingdom of God. He even taught his followers the same joy in the wilderness, saying, "When people reject you or persecute you for following me, rejoice, be very glad, because your reward is great in heaven." After his death and resurrection, Jesus commissioned his followers to go out and announce the good news that he was the risen King of the world. And as they did so, the early Christian communities were known for being full of joy, even when they were persecuted. Like when the Apostle Paul was sitting in a dirty Roman prison, he could say that he's chosen joy, even if he gets executed. He called this the joy of faith, or joy in the Lord. He believed it was the gift of God's Spirit, a sign that Jesus' presence is with you, inspiring hope in the midst of hardship. And when you believe that Jesus' love has overcome death itself, joy becomes reasonable in the darkest of circumstances. Now, this doesn't mean that you ignore or suppress your sorrow. That's not healthy or necessary. Paul often expressed his grief about missing loved ones or losing friends or his own freedom. He called it being full of sorrow and yet rejoicing. As he acknowledged his pain, he also made a choice to trust Jesus that his loss wouldn't be the final word. This is very different from the trite advice to turn that frown upside down. Christian joy is a profound decision of faith and hope in the power of Jesus' own life and love. And that's what biblical joy is all about.
We are in the third week of Advent. Now, the first sermon that I did, it was actually last week. So the first sermon was about Advent and wanting. I said, Advent is God asking you, what do you really want? So last week we talked about wanting and opening ourselves up to be honest about our real desires. And this week we talk about welcoming and what is required for us to welcome in the joy of Christ. But before I jump into that, next Sunday for Christmas, as I'm sure Christine talked about in the intro, we filmed these in different orders actually, but as Christine talked about in the intro, as we're kind of letting people know on Instagram, next Sunday night, we are having our drive-in Christmas event. Not drive through, but actually driving in and parking and experiencing a night of worship and experiencing, I just can't give it away, but it will not be what you expect. It'll be something unique. There will be no, getting out of cars and interacting, for people to feel safe, for people to feel good about coming with kids, with friends in cars. You will come, you will stay in your car the entire time, and we have what we believe is a very special, not a very special, but a very special time together to center in on Christmas being light overcoming darkness, and what that might mean for us right now. So next Sunday night, everything will be communicated leading up to it. The parking lot of the Sandbox, we are doing an in-person drive-in Christmas event. So we are looking forward to seeing everybody that night. So now back to the welcoming. I'm going to begin in Luke 2, 8 through 12. Luke writes, "And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night." By the way, the first angels appeared to shepherds in a field to tell them about the amazing news of the birth of Jesus. They did not appear to royalty. They did not appear to those in political power. They did not appear to the wealthiest. They did not appear to the most popular. They did not appear to the most desirable. The angels appeared to shepherds in a field who are low-level, marginalized. Shepherds were seen as sort of very low in the social status rankings. Where does God first communicate his good news? To the people who are forgotten, to the people who are not looked at as special. It's good news for the poor. It is good news for the whole world. We keep looking to be impressed with people at the top, and God keeps pointing our eyes towards those who are at the bottom. It's always a great reversal. Verse 9, "An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified." We're going to get to that in the second part. We get terrified when joy is right before us. "But the angel said to them, 'Do not be afraid. I will bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger.'" At the birth of Jesus, the angels come and say this is a message of joy for all people. It's the good news of joy for all people. Not joy for all Christians, not joy for everybody who's a part of the church. It is the good news, the cosmic, universal, explosive, indiscriminatory news of joy for all people. The central story of our universe is that we are here to enter into this flow of joy. Now, do you know what joy looks like on a person's face? Do you know what it feels, what it looks like? I'm going to give you a couple examples. One, this right here. This is joy. Who wants to feel that kind of joy for Christmas? Or this one right here. This is a little more subtle, but still real. This right here. Kevin McAllister, after going through everything he went through, finally seeing his mom on Christmas morning. You know, when I watched this recently, I actually cried at this part. I think it was my first time ever. Because you see a part of him and his pride wants to withhold and be mad at his mom. But then he just opens up and welcomes her in and just lets it all in. Ah, so good. Here's another one. You know what real and insane joy looks like? This right here. Chevy Chase in a Christmas vacation when the lights finally work and it all lights up in his face. This is Christmas joy. And then also this one right here. Ralphie. A Christmas Story. You watch it 7 times every Christmas on TBS. This is joy. Mary pondered when she got the news, and they all just freak out and are filled with joy. You know, this same welcoming in of Christ and joy is still waiting to be discovered more by all of us today. See, there's a time to want, like we talked about, to be honest about where you are and what you want. But then when there's a threshold and it's near and it's in front of you, there is a time where what's required to experience joy is for us to simply welcome it in. There's this amazing story about this indigenous woman, this First Nations woman in New Mexico, and there's a story about when her kids were young. They're probably like 4, 7, and I think 9. And each morning, as the sun rose over these hills in the distance, she would bring her kids outside as they woke up. And as they would watch the sun rise together, the mother would stand there with her children looking directly towards the light of the sun, and she would stand up and go like this. She was welcoming in the light in the morning, teaching her kids, you begin with welcoming in the light. How do you begin your day? By welcoming in the gift of light and warmth and clarity and vision. She taught her kids they begin their day by welcoming in the light. The incoming of Christ in this world is not a terror, it's an overwhelming joy. And just like that First Nations woman with her kids in the sun, sometimes you have to stop and just sit there and remove it and welcome everything in. The grace, the joy, just welcome it all in. Because joy is actually the grace that has been welcomed in. See, welcoming in Christ always leads to joy. And it seems so simple when I say that, doesn't it? When people say, all you have to do is welcome in the joy. All you have to do is choose joy. It seems so simple, but in practice, it's actually a little more complex. Because no matter how badly we want that, no matter how badly we desire it, welcoming in and experiencing joy actually isn't that simple, is it? So let's go back to the story. I think verse 9. An angel of the Lord appeared. Let me make sure it's the right verse. Yes, verse 9. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, right? The shepherds in the field, and that angel's coming, right? We're back in the story. The angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them. So the glory, the light is shining and dazzling and leaving them in awe, right? And what did they feel? The scriptures say they were terrified. Not filled with excitement, they were terrified. Not exploding with joy yet, they were afraid. But the angel said to them, do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. The shepherds were scared of the message of joy for their reasons. And I believe we are also scared of joy for our own reasons. See, I would say this. Human beings are afraid of joy. Human beings are afraid of joy. Some of you are like, no, Kevin. No, Kev, silly. Or as my daughter used to say, she would say, silly. She's like, just silly. Like, no, Kevin, we're not scared. Human beings are scared of joy. I'm serious when I say that. I think human beings are terrified of joy. See, in the great Brené Brown's research, she asked a group of people when they felt most vulnerable and exposed to loss. Right? Think about that. When are the moments when you feel the most vulnerable and exposed to loss? And what she discovered is that the most common answer of when people feel most vulnerable and exposed to loss is when they have experiences of great joy. So when do people feel the most vulnerable, exposed, and scared to and afraid of loss? Not when something bad's going to happen. It's when something great happens. That's when they're the most scared. Think about that. When things are going well and some new and exciting opportunities or relationships present themselves, it's like it comes in, and as we start to welcome it, we're like, and all of a sudden we freak out a little bit and we start to feel vulnerable and we start to get worried and we start to get anxious. Why would we get anxious and worried when something good is coming to us? And I would argue it's because we're scared the joy is not going to last. This is why Brown goes on in her research to talk about this dynamic of foreboding joy. How many people have heard of foreboding joy before? Yeah, foreboding joy is when human beings, we sort of dress rehearse tragedy. Right? When we're foreboding joy, it's almost like we're trying to beat disappointment to the punch. Something good happens, we assume, we think that something's going to go wrong and that will destroy us or we can't handle it. So it's almost like we want to beat disappointment to the punch and protect our hearts from that. And in doing so, we never ever fully welcome in the joy that was present. Because the same part of you that has to be open to experience joy is also the same part of you that has to be open to experience pain. So when we shut down the part of us that's scared of the pain, we also shut down the part of us that's able to welcome in more joy. Are you with me so far? We don't want to be blindsided by hurt. We don't want to be caught off guard. So we literally cut ourselves off from joy in order to remain in control, in order to protect ourselves from getting hurt. Basically, we don't want to allow ourselves to experience and welcome in the fullness of joy because of our fear that it might be taken away. Right? We place ourselves in the worst case scenario, shut down a part of our hearts, never fully experience the pain, but don't ever fully welcome in the joy. Right? When something good happens, our immediate thought is that we better not let ourselves truly welcome it in and feel it. Because if we really love it and appreciate it, we might lose it. So when we experience deep joy, we feel so vulnerable. We feel extraordinarily exposed for the fear that the joy will not last, something tragic will happen, and it will ultimately rob us of happiness and our life. Are you with me? How many people here, there's no judgment, how many people here ever find yourself foreboding joy? Yeah, how many people here ever find yourself trying to beat disappointment to the punch? How many people here, the moment something good happens, or worst case scenario, this could be taken away, shut down the part of my heart that will be hurt, but in the process, we shut down the part of our hearts that can welcome in the fullness of joy in and through and from Christ. That's why I would say this. Since we cannot accept how hard it might be, we cannot experience how good it actually is. Or since we cannot accept the possibility of pain, we can never fully welcome in the joy. Let me tell you a couple stories. Almost every one of my worst case scenarios as a young adult, in my 20s, came true. And I've told these stories in different times, like perhaps not all, or maybe you haven't heard them all told at the same moment. But I have had a teacher, pastor, authority figure who I respected a lot make a promise to me to be a part of something and then forget about me. And I had to find out that he did that, taught that class, or did whatever he did without me. And it crushed me. And that was one of my greatest fears, was just being disappointed by, leaders or authority figures or pastors that I respected. And, when it happened, I remember feeling really disappointed. I was really hurt, and I actually shed one single tear when I was outside reading by myself in the sun in a very sad moment. But then afterwards, that didn't cancel out joy. That didn't take away the joy that comes from Christ itself manifesting through a million different beautiful things in the world. It hurt, but it didn't take away joy. Another fear that I had, that people are scared of when you lead is you feared being a disappointment to other people. I don't want to be that person to others. I don't want to let people down. And sadly, when you choose to lead, you will do that to people. And I remember a young man who I love and respect years ago just told me, like, I was really disappointed when maybe I forgot to hit him back in the same way that guy did to me. And it was a horrible thing I always wanted to avoid. But you know what? He was gracious and forgave me, and it hurt. And it didn't cancel out joy in life. It didn't delete. It didn't take away and strip away joy. It just was a hard moment. And the joy of life and even our relationship continued. I've started creative endeavors that went great for a while and then didn't work out and we had to shut down. Some people's greatest fear is I don't want to try and open myself up to joy because it might be taken away from me. I've had things taken away, and you know what? They don't cancel out joy. They're just really hard for a little bit. And yet the joy of Christ emerging from 1,000 different beautiful places in life keeps coming at you. That hard thing you're scared of might happen, that you want to beat that disappointment to the punch. The real freedom is even when it happens, it doesn't cancel out the joy of Christ we see in Christmas that is available and exploding and coming out of life at all times. I could go on, but each one of those things going wrong or ending did not have the power to steal my joy. Just because those things ended, joy was never actually taken away. That thing died and joy was born again in a totally different place. Another relationship, another opportunity, the growth in me, the Spirit directly in me. That thing died, that thing didn't work, and then joy was born again in a totally different place. You need to let joy be born. Oh man, I didn't even plan to say this. Joy is born for the world in the manger on Christmas morning. And nobody can ever steal that joy. When one thing that your joy is attached to dies, let that thing die. You will see joy be born again in a different place. You don't have to worry about that thing ending. Joy will be born in a totally different place. But this might go wrong. It could go wrong, and joy is going to be born in a different place. Our joy is not attached to one specific thing working. Joy comes from the Christ that is going to be born again and again and again in all of these different places. After the disappointment, joy is born again. After that creative endeavor dies, joy is born again in another opportunity. After that relationship goes bad, joy is born again in a different place. After that person hurts you, joy is born again. Even in that relationship, after forgiveness and reconciliation, and it continues. Joy, the joy that is born in the manger for the world on Christmas morning, keeps being born again and again and again. Don't cut yourself off from the hard things because you cut off joy. But if you embrace the hard things, the pain, the possibility of things going wrong, and you allow them to die, to let go of when they happen, joy will be born again in a new place. Those things will die, but the joy of Christ will keep being born again and again. The joy of Christ can only be stopped by our refusal to welcome it in. Joy will keep being born again and again. The English poet William Blake tells this story of being a young boy in England, and he says how as he was walking through the forest, he saw a tree that was filled with angels of light, and he was just in awe. Can you imagine a little boy and the tree is just lit up with angels of light? And in that ecstatic state he was in, he runs home and he tells his dad the story. And the moment his dad hears the story about his son talking about these angels of light, the dad says, "Don't you ever tell me lies like this again, or I will give you a beating that you won't forget." Freaking dads, come on. Dads, we're not perfect, we're going to make mistakes, but can we do better than that, you're like, Dad, guess what? It's a Christmas miracle. I saw angels of light. I'll hit you if you say that again. I will hit you. If you're in awe, I will hit you. Okay. Merry Christmas. Like, can we do better than that? Dads, the world, our friends, our family, our managers, our coworkers, they want to try to beat the joy out of us. But the part of us that can trust joy will be born again and again. We cannot let them do that. This Advent season, we cannot let the world around us beat and threaten the joy out of us. Well, you know that's going to go wrong. Yeah, it might. But guess what? Joy is going to be born again. Oh, you're doing that? I mean, who is anyone even going to pay attention to that thing you did? I don't know. But no matter what happens, joy will be born again. Oh, they said they're going to come through for you. Haven't they disappointed you before? Yeah, they have. And even if they do again, that doesn't define me. Joy will be born again and again. Don't let your joy be attached to the specific things. See, your joy is contingent upon whatever it's connected to. If my joy is contingent upon that thing working out, I'm terrified. If my joy is only found in the Christ who will be born again and again in our world, I don't have to be scared of anything dying. I don't have to be scared of anything not working out, because in its place, joy out of the manger will be born again and again. Don't let people try to beat that joy out of you. Don't be scared to welcome in joy because of the fear of loss. It will be born again. Yes, we said what we wanted. Now let's practice that open-heartedness, unguarded. Can we welcome in joy more? Not let the fear of the joy being taken away from us stop us, because we are people who trust that joy will be born again and again and again and again.
Oh come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God appears. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Oh, come thou day spring, come and cheer our spirits by thy advent. Disperse the gloomy clouds of night, and death's dark shadows put to flight. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Shall come to thee, O Israel. Oh come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God appears. Rejoice. shall come to thee, O Israel. Shall come to thee, O Israel. Shall come to thee, O Israel.
Back at the fire before we close out with a good word that will be spoken and prayed over the people, especially when we live in a world and in a time and in a culture where just so many negative words are being spoken over us. Pray, Imagine Church, that you would cement this benediction into your heart and that you would carry it with you in the days to come. And so may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. And the community of Imagine says, amen. Thank you again to Cam, to the worship crew, for making this Sunday moment possible. We are excited for next week Sunday for our drive-in experience, where we will be seeing you again, 6 feet car apart and all. We will be there to celebrate the birth of Jesus. And so we will see you then.
Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. Joyful all ye nations rise, join the triumph of the skies. With angelic hosts proclaim, Christ is born in Bethlehem. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Hail the heaven-born Prince of Peace, hail the Son of Righteousness. Light and life to all he brings, here with healing in his wings. Mild he laid his glory by, born that man no more may die, born to raise the sons of earth, born to give them second birth. Hark the herald angels sing,